Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today is the next episode and process of making the shoulder rig for the 44 percussion cap pistol. So we've got our patterns made and we're getting ready to cut out our leather. So come on in and let's get started. Alright, so I've got my pattern for the actual holster that was cut out with in a previous episode when I used poster board. Now, when you're transferring your markings from your pattern to your leather, you want to make sure that you do have your leather turned the right direction, whether it's going to be a right hand or a left hand. In this case, it's going to be a right hand draw, but it's going to be a cross draw because this is a shoulder holster. So this will fit underneath the left arm, and the right arm would be drawing the pistol. So we need to make sure that I have this laid out the right direction. And when I made my pattern, I made sure that I marked it, and I always mark it on the side that's going to be up for me when I lay it onto my leather and do my tracing. So I want to turn this around on this piece of leather to make sure I've got the best use of the piece of leather that I have. I am going to use a ballpoint pen. Some people just use a scribe. Some people use a pencil. I like to use a ballpoint pen because it is very smooth on the leather. I don't have to press hard when I'm tracing my pattern, and I'm going to bevel that edge anyway, so that ballpoint pen mark goes away when I do my beveling. And again, it helps if you can switch hands and you're kind of become ambidextrous when you're tracing these patterns. But with a decent ballpoint pen, I don't have to press hard. I can just let that glide along that leather. But again, that's a personal preference, whatever you feel comfortable using. Obviously, if I wasn't going to bevel these edges and take that mark, knowing I was going to take that mark off of there, then I wouldn't use a pen. I'd use something else. But knowing that I'm going to bevel that anyway. And then I'll take my good sharp knife and I'll go ahead and I'll start cutting around that mark. And again, I'm cutting right on the mark. I'm not cutting to the inside or the outside. I'm trying to cut right on that pin mark. And I'm going really slow because I want to stay on that mark. Another good reason to have a good sharp knife so that I can go fairly slow and not have to put a ton of pressure on that. because I find the more pressure I have to put on the blade to cut through the leather, the harder it is to stay on the line. So if I don't have to put a ton of pressure on that blade to get it to go through, it feels to me like I have a lot more control as that sharp blade just glides through that leather. Now, does that mean it's going to go through the entire thickness of the leather the first time I cut on this line? Not necessarily. It might, or it may in places, but that doesn't mean that I can't, once I get my first initial cut, go back and go over that again. Once you've made your initial cut, that blade will track right in that line of that initial cut. So I continue around. Again, I'm taking my time, trying to stay right on that line. And you notice I keep turning my piece of leather. Anytime it gets to where it feels like it's going to be an awkward angle when I'm using my knife, I keep turning my piece of leather. That way I keep my angle that I'm using my knife, I keep it very comfortable position. Now you can see how quickly it follows that line the second time, and it just slices right through it. Again, you got to have a sharp knife, and that's again your choice of what type of knife you want to use, whether you want to use an X-Acto type of knife, a box cutter. I prefer the utility knife just because of the handle itself. I feel like I have a lot more control where I can hold that handle in the palm of my hand and get a good grip on it instead of a skinny like box cutter type knife or an X-Acto type craft knife. I feel like I have a lot more control. And again, as I come around, that is just following in that first groove that I cut. So slick. Obviously I have to pay attention to what I'm doing, but that knife is just naturally following the initial cut. And again, if you get to where it's uncomfortable, just change the position of the leather and turn it. And notice too, I'll stop, I'll make shortcuts. I don't try to make super long cuts. I'll make shortcuts and then I'll check it and make sure I got through, because I don't want to have to go over this 2 or 3 times if I don't have to get that cut out. Again, I'm turning it. And I'm still not putting very much pressure on that blade. That blade, make sure it's in that original slot that you cut the first time. And there you go. Put this scrap aside. And there's the piece of leather. And that's for the actual holster, so if I fold that over, you can see now that's what the holster looks like. So there's the holster cut out with the pattern. Set it aside. Get my next piece. Now this one's a little bit bigger. And we'll pull out a little bit on the view. This is the shoulder rig piece. And it's going to be the same technique as far as tracing the pattern onto the piece of leather. And you notice I keep moving my non-drawing hand and repositioning it on the pattern to where I am going to trace, because I don't want that pattern moving at all. So I'll draw, move my offhand, non-drawing hand to hold that pattern in place. Here, I'm going to switch hands and hold with my left and draw with my right. That way I'm not crossing over. Now that may not be comfortable for some of you, so I would understand if you might move your piece. Alright, there's my piece traced out off of that particular pattern. Now on this piece, what I'm going to do, since it's much larger than the holster, is I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of wholesale cut some of this excess off of here. And I'm going, approximately around 1/2 inch away from my line. And the whole point of this is to get these bigger chunks out of the way, lay them aside, and then I don't have so much material in my workspace or causing an obstruction as I'm trying to cut. So I'll lay those pieces over to the side. This is going to be a much bigger piece, so I'll cut around, and I'm just eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be precise or anything. You're going to go back and cut that along the line, but look what that does. Let me get this cut off of here. Look what that gets rid of, that great big piece out of the middle, and then I have a much smaller piece that I have to maneuver around in my area, my work area. So believe I'm going to start on this end. And just like the holster, I'm going to go slowly and try to stay right on that line best I can. And then I'll move my piece back in front of me where it's much more comfortable. When you get down so far, start kind of getting behind the center of your body, it becomes much more uncomfortable to keep cutting, so that's why I keep moving it back to my right. Again, I'm cutting with my left hand. I'll say probably the majority of the people are going to be cutting with the right hand. And I'll go back and double check this, make sure I got through. If I didn't get through all the way, cut the areas again. Sometimes it just, if you have a good sharp knife, all it takes is just dragging that blade through there the second time just to cut maybe a super thin piece that you didn't get through the first time. And I'm going to cut that out of my way too, just like I did the excess before I actually got started cutting on my pattern line. And then that's just another piece that I can get rid of out of my way. So that's that piece I just cut off. I can throw it aside, get it out of my way, come back to the inside and do the same thing. I'm kind of starting on the straight line edge, and it has this gradual curve that's going to be going around the shoulder. Moving slowly, trying to stay on that line. Get as steady of a cut as I possibly can. And I'm also trying to keep my knife as straight. I don't want to angle it one way or the other so that I get a good straight cut on my leather. I can go back and I'm going to quickly follow that groove that I just cut in there. And I've got my fingernail running across this as I'm cutting it off, just so that I know it's releasing off of there. lot of times you can feel, you have those self-healing mats like I use, you can feel it when your blade gets to that mat. It just has a totally different feel to it. It becomes real smooth when your blade gets down to that mat. So I'll throw that aside, and then all that does is that leaves each end that I have to cut off. Both of them basically about the same. So I'll do that next. And it's a much tighter radius, so it will take a little more time. Get rid of that piece, move this over, do the other end. And I do use more of the point of the blade when I use these cut these tight radiuses. I use more of the point, and I keep my knife, the back of my knife, up in the air further, so that I'm cutting with a smaller piece of the blade, because I am in a tighter radius. I can actually, after cutting out the holster and now cutting this piece, I can actually feel my blade starting to get dull. So if I was going to continue to cut some more pieces, I'd go ahead and change my blade. So there's the shoulder rig portion. Alright, so there's the shoulder rig portion cut out. It goes over the shoulder, and we'll come down and connect the holster to the actual rig. You can see how well that fits. It will connect under here. I'll let you see that a little bit better as those two pieces come together, like so, underneath the arm. Then the holster, once it's finished and sewn, it will attach at that spot also. So that gives you an idea of what that's going to look like. I do have some pieces already cut out for the harness part of the rig. And all I did was take about a 4-inch circle and cut me a piece of leather. Then I cut some small angles on it, cut out slots a 1/2 inch back from those flat spots, and then cut 3/4 inch wide straps. And I'd say these are, probably about 4 foot, 3.5, 4 foot long. I wanted to make sure I had plenty of length on these straps, and this is what will actually go across the back. So 2 of these will be hooked onto the shoulder piece, like so, and I'll round these off, but I'll probably rivet those on, and maybe that'll let those turn just a little bit if they need to be more comfortable. Then this piece, almost like a vest, this piece will go around the back. Then on the other side, these two ends, and these do cross over one another in the back, and that's going to help support. These two ends will go around. Let me put this on, give you an idea. These two ends will go around the other arm, and I'll put some type of buckle or snap or something here, but I'll make it adjustable. And then what that does is this side holds the shoulder rig, and this side keeps it from moving. So it keeps it very stable, and then it crosses over in the back. And that's what keeps it stable on your back and keeps these straps from moving. So there's another step in the process of making this shoulder rig. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please come back. We'll get into finishing this stuff as fast as we can on the next episode. And like I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.